Hello, beautiful. Welcome to the She Sacral podcast. I'm your host, Lindsay Christian. Let's go ahead and get started with today's episode. Hello, sacral beauties. Welcome to the She Sacral podcast, where we focus on burnout recovery through the power of sacred pleasure. So welcome. Today, we're starting a new series, and we're going to talk about the 12 stages of burnout. But before I can really dive into those different stages, I wanted to use this episode to focus on what is burnout really, and how does this really affect women on a deeper level. Now, I briefly covered what happens to our womb space in our YouTube video, focusing on how burnout affects the womb, but I want to do a deep overview on what burnout really is. Okay, so let's start off by explaining what is burnout. Now, a lot of times when you hear the term burnout and you have not gone through it, you might think it just means, oh, you're really tired, or you're really stressed out, or maybe you're just tired of doing the same thing over and over again. But burnout is so much deeper. It's not just about being tired or being exhausted. It is a systematic shutdown. Physically, you go through fatigue, you go through weight changes, you go through hormonal imbalance, and it can only get worse when it is not healed, when we don't shift the energy of what's creating the burnout. For myself, I went through stages of burnout for over 2 years, and it became so chronic that it started to affect my thyroid. I couldn't lose weight no matter how hard I tried. And I naturally had a very high metabolism, like weight was never an issue for me, but through burnout, it became a thing. And it truly felt like I was in hell. Just gonna be honest. That's what it felt like. My heart rate was all over the place. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't rest. I was irritable. I was just all over the place. It was awful. Emotional signs of burnout could be numbness, irritability, as I spoke about before, feeling hopeless, like nothing's going to work. You can't even see any cloud in the sky. No sun exists. It's just all darkness. Spiritually, you can feel disconnected from joy, from your sense of purpose, from your intuition. And oftentimes it's misdiagnosed. Someone may say, oh, you're just lazy. Or maybe it's anxiety. You're just a little stressed out. You're a little anxious. But it is so much deeper. Women especially normalize burnout, so they miss the signs. And burnout is your body's way of screaming to you that I cannot keep living like this. We cannot continue to live our lives, to operate, to be like this. Women are especially vulnerable to burnout, because we operate on hormonal rhythms, not from a space of constant output. We are cyclical in nature. We fluctuate naturally. This is how we are designed. And so when those rhythms and those hormonal fluctuations get disrupted, it creates even more problems for our entire system. Society often pushes women into linear, masculine productivity cycles on a daily basis, right? Men operate on a circadian rhythm of 24 hours, where it's sun up to sundown, and that's how most working schedules work. It focuses on what fits the majority of the workforce. 9 to 5, which is 50% of the population, in the daytime, Monday through Friday. But women don't operate like that. We have a totally different system. And so society pushes us into trying to fit this masculine productivity way of doing things without looking at the nature of how women are designed. And I get it, right? I get it because every woman is unique. Not every woman has the same cycles. Some women don't have cycles. It's just a bit too risky to put our working lifestyle in that way, because everyone would be so drastically different. So I understand that, but it's just the fact that there's very little understanding behind it, And it's almost that women are very silenced and there's no safety to feel comfortable to say, I don't operate this way, but I do operate like this. This is what works for me and this is how I can get things done. But we don't operate like that. It's like, do this or you're fired. that's kind of the undertone for a lot of things. And sometimes I'll see teams and businesses and companies that are still women owned. It doesn't mean that nature is implemented in the workflow. It's still done under this very masculine productivity, probably even worse, because there's this feeling or this need to prove yourself in the space of being a woman and working. And so we're conditioned to overfunction beyond our means, to constantly people please, to ignore when your body is saying no. And we feel ashamed. We feel like failures when we feel like we can't keep up, especially as we're getting older. That's another layer that's there. You start to have new generations coming in. They're faster, they're quicker, maybe they have more energy, and you start to feel replaceable. You start to feel like I'm going to be replaced, or you feel threatened. And that also creates an internal burnout as well. And so you're not designed, my love, to run like a machine. You're designed to move and align and shift like the moon. The moon is very representative of the woman's body, of all the different phases that she goes through. The new moon aligns with our menstrual phases, where we're starting fresh, we're starting new. The waxing moon is the building energy, like the follicular phase of our cycles. The full moon is that peak energy with the rise of the tides, where it literally pulls water up to the surface. And in that, it pulls our emotions up to the surface as well. It's our peak energy of ovulation. And then the waning moon phases align with the luteal phase, where things are winding down. And then we start that process again and again and again. And so I want to talk about cortisol and hormones that play a role when it comes to burnout. Burnout heavily dysregulates your hormones. You have chronic stress, which creates chronic imbalance, which disrupts your estrogen levels and disrupts progesterone. And this can lead into weight gain, especially around your belly area, with PMDD, with painful periods, with PMS, with anxiety, with fatigue, with low libido, with inflammation in the body. That's what happens when we're burned out. But nobody talks about that. What do they say? They say, oh, just take a day off, you'll feel better. No, our bodies don't feel safe. And so when we can practice sacred pleasure, cycle syncing or harmonizing our cycles, nervous system repair, working to soothe and calm down that nervous system, that's when we can start to recover. And so some things you can start to tell yourself when it comes to burnout is that I am not lazy. I am hormonally out of rhythm. You have to think about the hormones. The hormones are messengers. They're your communication system in your body. And when we're in this space of burnout, that means we have been silencing those hormones. We've been shutting them down. We've been overriding our body's natural signals. And so things start to get a little wonky. So when we start to work with our bodies and listen to our bodies when we're tired, we're not filling our bodies with caffeine, but we're resting. We're hydrating our bodies. We're eating nourishing food. We're not skipping meals to get more work done. That's what burnout does. So we have to learn that stress is not the baseline, but safety is your birthright. Now let's talk a little bit about your feminine energy when it comes to burnout. And so feminine energy is repetitive, but on a cyclical basis, right? It's not repetitive in the sense that it is every single day we're feeling the same, but it repeats the cycle over and over again. It's creative and it is intuitive. Burnout pulls you into the state of survival. Everything is fast, everything is disconnected, and everything is rigid. And so when you're in the space of healing, you're returning to that soft power. You're returning to flow. You're returning to embodiment. You're returning to that inner knowing, that deep intuition that you have within you. And the mistake that we make is that we feel like we need more discipline. We need to be harder on ourselves. We need to be stricter with ourselves. But truly, you just need more devotion. We need to commit to ourselves more. That is the way that we begin to own that rhythm. And so burnout truly burns out everything. It burns out the mind, it burns out the heart, the emotions, it burns out the spirit, where it disconnects you from your spirit. It disconnects everything that you love, feel, and know that makes you feel good. Burnout is also a foundational issue. So a lot of times we may change a few things. Let's say you change a job, right? You work this job and you're like, oh, I'm so burned out. I am so tired of the way that people treat me at this job. The workload is too much and things would be better if I just get a new job. And then you get a new job and somehow a few months down the road, you run into burnout again. And it's the same energy, different people, different business name. And it just continues to happen over and over again because it's a foundational issue. Sometimes the foundational issue is within the business itself because you have a lot of people that are running and operating businesses that don't really know what they're doing. I'm just going to be honest. They have no clue on how to create a stable, functioning, operational business. And that impacts you. No matter how many boundaries you set, no matter how many things you say, no matter how many systems you put in place, if the system and the foundation of the company or the business that you work for does not have a strong foundation, they keep changing things every 2 seconds, there's no way that you're going to be able to not be burned out in those spaces because it has the formula for burnout. So we have to use discernment to know that that's not going to be the best fit for me. It's not just, oh, if I get a new job and I work at a new place, that everything's going to be fine again. We have to have discernment to look for the signs of what that space is going to feel and be like based on their answers in the interview. That's why it's so important to ask them some deep, deep questions, such as, what does success look like to you? How do you operate? Tell me a little bit about your workflow. Tell me a little bit about your systems. If they don't have one, it's a red flag. Sometimes the foundation that we've created within ourselves is creating the burnout, right? The need to prove yourself, the people pleasing, the overgiving, all of what comes with that, that's going to create burnout for you. No matter where you go, even if the systems are put in place that are healthy at a business. If that's how your foundation has been designed through conditioning, through beliefs, through patterns, whatever it is, whether you've been rewarded for burning out and overgiving and overworking, that then becomes that foundation that no matter where you go, burnout will find you. Even when you work for yourself, especially when you work for yourself. You have to be really on point and very deeply connected to yourself and what you feel comfortable with. And we have to be committed to ourselves to say, I'm going to prioritize my well-being in this business. I am not going to sacrifice my peace for $1. Which many of us do, especially when we're in this state of survival. And I get it. When your lights are getting cut off, or when you can't pay your bills, or when you can't buy food to eat, that's going to push you into saying, I will do whatever it takes because I need to survive, right? If we've had certain beliefs or deep emotional wounds that lead us to burnout, which we'll cover in another series. We can have money wounds. Maybe we grew up in a space of poverty or not having enough money or not having enough food to eat when we're little. That's going to drive you to want to work harder, which is going to lead you into burnout. or acceptance wounds, where it's like you just want to be accepted, so you keep proving and proving and proving and proving and proving until you can finally get that validation to say, I am good enough. You're going to burn out, right? There's all of these complexities that drive us into burnout. So we have to start there first, as opposed to trying to do these quick fixes and changing the outside portions when we're not able to shift what's inside. We're going to run into that same pattern of burnout over and over again. And so I'm really excited to dive into this series with you to help you focus on recovering from burnout, because number one, you're going to start to finally understand where you are in the burnout spiral. You'll stop blaming that willpower and start listening to your body. You're going to learn the real tools and techniques and things that you can apply instead of just some little motivational pep talks. And this series is a combination of both education and just a deep emotional exhale. And so your healing begins the moment you stop pushing and you start listening. Now, for a little preview for the rest of this series, we're going to walk through each stage of burnout. We're going to talk about the signs and symptoms. We're going to talk about your hormones. We're going to talk about the nervous system. We're going to talk about some sacred recovery practices that you can do. And we're going to just really dive into each stage so you can get a deeper understanding. Now, these are based on real patterns, not just clinical diagnosis. I want you to feel seen and understood, even in the space of burnout. So we'll talk everything from the early stages of overgiving all the way to feeling numb and disconnected from your body and eventually going into burnout collapse. All right, so in the next episode, we're going to start with the first stage of burnout, which is where burnout hides behind productivity and passion. Now, if you're ready to shift your body out of burnout and into sacred pleasure, you can access 30 days of pleasure rituals in the link down below, along with our private community, so you have consistent support. All right, well, thank yourself so much for showing up today, and thank you for tuning in to the She Sacral podcast.